The moon hung low, casting silver streaks across the dense forest. Every leaf shimmered as if sprinkled with stardust. At the heart of this wild expanse stood Alara, her eyes ablaze with defiance. She was the omega of a minor pack, underestimated by all, except the one man who commanded fear across the lands, the Alpha King, Caldraven. Kale was the embodiment of power, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, with a presence that could silence even the rowdiest wolf. He ruled with an iron paw, demanding loyalty, respect, and fear. Few dared to cross him, fewer survived the consequences. But Alara didn't bow. She stepped into the clearing where Cal's loyal guards flanked him. The moment their eyes met, the air seemed to crackle. The pack murmured. Nobody had ever dared to challenge the Alpha King directly, not in a century. Caldraven, she said, her voice steady but daring. I challenge you. A hush fell over the clearing. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. For the first time in his long life, a spark of something unfamiliar intrigue flickered in them. You dare challenge me? His voice was deep, dangerous, dripping with both amusement and warning. I do, she replied, holding his gaze without flinching. Cal's guards tensed. This wasn't a game, yet Cal found himself curious. There was something about her, something untamed and wild that mirrored the forest itself. He had always believed his world was unshakable, until now. Alara's challenge was not about power. It was about freedom, about proving that her life was not dictated by fear or submission. And that defiance stirred something primal in Cale, an emotion he had long buried beneath the weight of his crown. Very well, he said, his voice a low rumble. If you want to challenge me, you'll face the trials of the moon. Survive them, and I'll grant your request. Fail, his gaze darkened, a storm behind his eyes. You'll wish you had never spoken my name. Alara's heart raced, but she didn't step back. She had prepared for this moment all her life. She was not just challenging Kyle, she was challenging herself, the destiny everyone else had tried to impose on her. And as the moon climbed higher, casting its silver light over the two wolves locked in silent war, the first spark of a storm began. A storm that would turn Kyle's world, and his heart, completely upside down. The clearing was now empty except for Cale and Alara. The pack had retreated to a safe distance, murmuring anxiously among themselves. The trials of the moon were legendary, tests designed to break even the strongest of hearts. They were brutal, unforgiving, and merciless. Cale circled her slowly, the sound of his claws scratching against the forest floor echoing like a drumbeat in the night. The first trial, he said, is endurance. You will run with me through the forest of shadows until the sun rises. Only those who endure the night may live to face the next trial. Alara met his gaze unflinching. Her heart raced, but she didn't speak of fear. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. The forest loomed like a living beast. Every tree seemed to twist and whisper as if warning them. Cal shifted, his form blurring into his wolf self. Massive, sleek, and deadly, his fur glimmering in the moonlight. Alara's own transformation began, her human body elongating, muscles tightening, claws extending. When she finally stood on all fours, she felt power she had never known. The wind sang around her fur, the forest calling to her primal instincts. Run, Cale commanded, and they were off. The night became a blur of trees and shadows. Kyle's wolf form was faster, stronger, but Alara held her ground. With every leap she felt his presence, dominant, intoxicating, dangerous. Her heart raced, not just from exertion, but from the electric tension between them. Hours passed. The forest seemed endless. But then came the first test, the ravine of whispers. A yawning chasm that had swallowed many challengers before her. The whispers of the lost echoed from the depths, chilling even the bravest of hearts. Cal stopped at the edge, his golden eyes glowing in the dark. Many have turned back here, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. Tell me, Alara, will you? Alara stepped forward. Her paws dug into the earth. I will not turn back, she said firmly. Not for fear. Not for you. Not for anyone. Cal's eyes softened for just a moment, almost imperceptibly. He had not expected her courage, her fire. Something inside him stirred, something he had not felt in centuries, respect, and something dangerously close to desire. With a leap that defied logic, Alara sprang across the ravine. The wind roared around her, the echoes of the forest seeming to cheer her on. Kale followed, his leap a shadow beside hers, landing gracefully on the other side. As they stood, chest heaving, hearts pounding, Kale's gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. Every instinct screamed at him to dominate, to control, but every other instinct, the one he had thought dead, whispered, "She is unlike any other." "You have strength, courage, and a fire I did not expect," Kale murmured, shifting back into his human form as dawn's first light crept into the forest. "The next trial will test your heart, Elara. Are you prepared for that?" Elara met his gaze, her chest rising and falling. "I've been ready my whole life." And with that, the second trial began, a test that would not only challenge her courage, but awaken a storm of emotions neither of them could ignore. The forest had grown quiet, the morning mist curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. Elara felt the tension in the air, heavier than the night's exhaustion. The first trial had tested her body, but the second trial would test her heart. Kyle stepped closer, his human form towering over her. His gaze, dark and magnetic, held a challenge more dangerous than any physical trial. "The second trial," he said, his voice low and husky, "is about connection. You must face your deepest fear and trust me to guide you through it." Elara's pulse quickened. Every nerve in her body screamed at her, not just from fear, but from the way Kale's presence stirred something primal inside her. The Alpha King, dangerous, untouchable, untamed, was inches from her, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. He extended his hand, fingers brushing hers. The contact was electric, a spark that sent shivers down her spine. "Close your eyes," he whispered, "and follow my scent." Elara obeyed, feeling the forest dissolve around her as Kale led her deeper into the mist. The air thickened, charged with the scent of pine earth, and something far more intoxicating him. Every step they took together brought her heartbeat closer to his, every breath sensing with the subtle rhythm of his body. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath her. Shadows rose from the fog, forming into twisted figures of wolves she had once known, friends who had betrayed her, enemies who had hunted her. They lunged at her, snarling, eyes glowing with menace. "Fear them," Kale commanded, his voice a tether in the chaos. "But do not let them control you." Elara felt her instincts surge. She could run, hide, or fight, but instead she focused on the one constant in the storm, Kale. His scent, his warmth, the steady force of him at her side. She realized then that the trial was not about defeating the shadows. It was about trusting someone with your heart in the midst of fear. With a deep breath, she met the eyes of the nearest shadow. Instead of cowering, she stood tall, letting Kyle's presence guide her. The shadows hissed, twisted, and finally dissolved into the morning mist. Kale's hand tightened around hers, and for a moment, the world shrank to the two of them. His golden eyes bore into hers, fierce and unrelenting. "You are unlike anyone I've ever met," he murmured. "Your fire, it calls to me." Elara felt her cheeks flush, her heart hammering not just from the trial but from the intensity of his gaze. "And you," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her, "you're not invincible, Kyle. Not to me." For the first time, the Alpha King felt his carefully built walls begin to crack. Desire, respect, and a dangerous kind of fascination twisted together, leaving him exposed in ways he had never allowed. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as dawn's light painted the clearing gold. Elara had passed the trial of hearts, but the fire she had ignited in Kale was only beginning. "Prepare yourself for the final trial," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "It will test everything, your strength, your courage, and the very limits of your heart." Elara's lips curled into a determined smile. "I've come this far," she said. "I will not turn back now." Kyle's golden eyes softened, just slightly, but the storm within him raged. The final trial would be the one that changed everything, and neither of them would emerge unchanged. The sun had fully risen, painting the forest in shades of gold and green. Birds chirped, but the tension between Elara and Kale was thicker than any silence the forest had ever known. The first two trials had tested her body and heart, but the final trial would test her very soul. Kyle's eyes, golden and piercing, locked onto hers. "The final trial," he said, his voice low and commanding, "is a test of surrender and control. You must face me completely, not just as your Alpha King, but as the storm that lives within me. Can you withstand it, or will it consume you? Alara's breath caught. She knew what this meant. The trial was not just physical, but mental, emotional, and dangerously intimate. Her pulse raced, a mix of fear and anticipation. I will face it, she said firmly. Cale's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, but the raw intensity in his eyes remained. He stepped closer, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The forest seemed to fade around them, leaving only the two of them, circling each other like wolves in a delicate, deadly dance. Do you trust me? Cale asked, his voice barely above a whisper, yet commanding enough to make her shiver. Alara nodded, though her body trembled. I trust you, she said. With a sudden surge, Kyle shifted into his wolf form, massive and magnificent under the sunlight. His movements were fluid, controlled, yet filled with raw power. Alara followed suit, feeling her own transformation sharpen her senses, heighten her instincts. The trial began, not with a fight, but with a dance of dominance and surrender. Cale tested her reflexes, her strength, her ability to read him, anticipate him, and meet him as an equal. Each leap, each movement, each growl brought them closer together, not just physically, but emotionally. At one point, Cale pinned her gently to the ground, his golden eyes blazing with an intensity that made her heart race. You are fiercely stronger than I imagined, he murmured, his breath hot against her fur. And yet there is a fire in you I cannot control. Alara met his gaze, unflinching. Then perhaps, she whispered, we are meant to learn from each other. For the first time in his life, Cale felt his world tilt, not from danger, but from desire, respect, and something he dared not name aloud. The storm he had long contained inside himself threatened to break free, and he realized with a jolt, Alara had turned his world upside down. Hours passed in the trial, each moment a test of skill, trust, and restraint. By the time the sun dipped again toward the horizon, both wolves were panting, bodies slick with effort, hearts pounding in perfect synchrony. Finally, Cale stepped back, shifting into his human form once more. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek, gentle but possessive. You have passed, he said, his voice low, a growl threaded with awe and desire. No one has ever challenged me like this and survived. Alara's chest rose and fell with relief and exhaustion, yet her eyes sparkled with triumph. I survived, she said, a teasing edge in her voice. And maybe I've changed you too, Cale Draven. For the first time in centuries, the Alpha King smiled, not the cold, fearsome smile of a ruler, but a genuine, almost vulnerable one. Perhaps you have, he admitted, and in that moment the world they had known, the rules, the hierarchy, the fear shifted forever. As the forest bathed in twilight, Cale and Alara stood side by side. No longer just Alpha and Challenger, no longer just Wolf and Omega. They were something more, something dangerously intoxicating, equals, partners, and perhaps destined mates. And the storm in Cale's heart roared to life, unstoppable, untamed, and entirely because of her. The forest was quiet now, but the tension between Cale and Alara was electric. Like a storm ready to break, they had survived the trials of the moon, but surviving together had changed everything. The Alpha King, once unshakable and cold, was no longer the same. Alara, once underestimated, had proven herself fearless, fierce, and intoxicatingly irresistible. Cale's golden eyes followed her every movement, tracing the curve of her jaw, the flash of defiance in her gaze. You are unlike anyone I have ever known, he murmured, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. Every part of me wants you. Alara's heart skipped a beat. She had trained herself to be strong, to fight, to survive, but nothing had prepared her for the magnetism of the Alpha King. Her body hummed with tension, her mind caught between caution and desire. Then you will have to earn me, Cale, she said, her voice low, teasing, dangerous. Cale smirked. A predator and a prince rolled into one. I intend to, he replied, and the way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Their first touch was tentative, electric, fingers brushing, fur ruffling, breaths mingling. It was a test of restraint, a delicate dance of dominance and surrender. The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken promises, a tension that threatened to ignite at any moment. Hours passed in whispered words, shared glances, and near touching that left both of them aching. Cale's control, always perfect, slipped ever so slightly when Alara smiled, a mischievous spark in her eyes, and Alara's fire, usually contained, flared with every look, every touch, every heartbeat that matched Cal's own. Suddenly, Cal pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "I've spent centuries ruling a world of fear," he whispered. "And yet you've shown me there's more to strength than power. There's fire, courage, and love." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "And you've shown me," she said softly, "that even a king can be human." The moment stretched, intimate and unbreakable. For the first time, the Alpha King and the Omega were not just rivals, not just leader and challenger, but two hearts colliding with impossible force. Cal's hands cradled her face, thumbs brushing against her cheeks, while his lips hovered dangerously close. "You've changed my world," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "And I will not let you go." Alara's breath caught, her resolve mingling with desire. "Then don't," she whispered back, and with that the dam broke. The first kiss was slow, electric, a storm of emotions finally finding release. Fire, fear, passion, respect, all collided in that single moment. Cal's lips on hers were both claim and promise, and Alara responded with equal intensity, her hands tangling in his hair as the world around them seemed to disappear. The forest, once a place of trials and shadows, now became their sanctuary. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word forged a bond stronger than any law of pack or kingdom. They had survived the trials, but the real journey, the journey of heart, trust, and love, was only beginning. And Cal Draven, the Alpha King, knew one undeniable truth. His world had not just been turned upside down, it had been reborn around her. The sun had risen high, scattering golden light through the forest, yet the world felt different to Alara and Kyle. Nothing could undo what had happened between them. The trials of the moon had forged a bond far stronger than challenge or rivalry. But the world outside the clearing was not so easily tamed. Kyle led Alara back to the pack grounds, his hand firmly clasped around hers. Every wolf in the pack turned, eyes widening in shock and awe. Whispers spread like wildfire. The Alpha King had allowed a challenger to not only survive, but to stand beside him as his equal. "Kale?" One of his lieutenants began, hesitant. "This is unprecedented. She challenged you and yet she survived," Kale interrupted, his voice calm but edged with authority. "And she earned her place here. Alara is no ordinary Omega. She is fierce, loyal, and her courage commands respect." The murmurs died down, but not completely. Many wolves were skeptical, unable to reconcile the image of the fearless Alpha King with a woman who had turned his world upside down. Alara felt the weight of their stares, yet she did not flinch. She met each pair of eyes steadily, her presence radiating the confidence she had earned through the trials. Kale's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise that he would protect her, no matter what. "Enough talk," Kale said finally, his golden eyes scanning the pack. "She has proven herself. The trials are over, and from this day forward she stands beside me, not as a challenger, but as my mate." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war and peace all at once. Shock rippled through the pack, but some of the younger wolves, inspired by Alara's courage, nodded in approval. The die was cast. The Alpha King's world had changed. Later that night, under the silver glow of the moon, Kale and Alara stood on the cliff overlooking the valley. The wind whipped around them, carrying the sense of the forest, of the pack, of each other. "You've changed everything," Kale murmured, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I was unshakable, untouchable, but you've broken through every wall I had." Alara smiled softly, leaning into his warmth. "And you've awakened something in me I didn't know existed: desire, trust, love." Kyle's lips brushed hers, a soft, lingering kiss that spoke volumes. This was no longer a trial, it was a promise, a merging of hearts that defied rules, packs, and centuries of expectation. But beyond the moonlit valley, in the shadows of rival packs and lurking enemies, whispers began to stir. Not everyone would welcome this union. Not everyone would accept a woman who dared to challenge the Alpha King and survive. The calm before the storm was over. Their bond was forged, their hearts entwined, but the real challenges, those of loyalty, power, and survival, were only beginning. And Kale knew one thing with unshakable certainty: as long as Alara was by his side, he would face every storm, every enemy, and every threat, because together they were unstoppable. The forest had never felt so alive, and yet so threatening. While the bond between Kale and Alara had strengthened, not everyone welcomed their union. Whispers of rebellion and resentment spread through rival packs, and enemies long thought vanquished began to stir in the shadows. Kale sensed it first, the subtle shift in the wind, the tension in his pack, the distant howls that carried a challenge. "Something approaches," he murmured, his golden eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. "And it's not friendly." Alara, standing close to him, felt the thrill of danger ignite her blood. She had survived his trials, and now she would face real threats, side by side with the Alpha King who had become more than her challenger. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady, yet carrying a fire that matched his own. Night fell quickly, the moon casting pale silver light across the valley. From the tree line, figures emerged, wolves from a rival pack, eyes glinting with malice and teeth bared. Their leader stepped forward, a towering brute with scars that spoke of countless battles. "Draven," he growled, "your reign is over. That Omega does not belong to you." Cal's stance stiffened, muscles coiled, ready to strike. But Alara stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "She does belong to him," Cal said, voice like thunder. "And if you wish to test that, you will face both of us." The rival pack hesitated, sensing the power between them. Kale and Alara moved in perfect unison, their bond manifesting not just in strength, but in coordination. Alara's agility complemented Kale's raw power, their attacks synchronized like a deadly dance. The clash was cinematic, leaps, snarls, sparks of fury illuminating the night. Every movement spoke of trust, passion, and fire. Kyle pinned an attacker with effortless strength while Alara struck from the shadows, her claws precise, her speed unmatched. Finally, as the moon reached its zenith, the last enemy fell, retreating into the darkness. The forest was silent once more, except for their heavy breaths and the distant echoes of howls fading away. Kale pulled Alara close, brushing a smear of blood from her cheek, not his own, but hers, a badge of courage and survival. "You are remarkable," he whispered, lips brushing her temple. "Not just a challenger. Not just my mate, but my equal." Alara leaned into him, her heart pounding with exhilaration and desire. "And you," she replied, "you're more than a king. You're mine." The Alpha King's eyes darkened with emotion, a storm of possessiveness, respect and passion swirling in their depths. "Yes," he murmured, "forever." But as they embraced, a shadow lingered at the edge of the clearing, silent, watching, plotting. Their trials had only begun. Enemies were still out there, waiting for weakness, waiting for a chance to strike. Kale and Alara knew one truth: their love had been tested and forged in fire, but the war for their bond and their lives was far from over. And together they would face it, all the storms, all the darkness, all the challenges. Because no force in the world could break the bond of the Alpha King and the woman who had turned his world upside down.